Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into the most intriguing ideas to distill surprising insights.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're embarking on a journey into a concept so radical, so utterly captivating, it genuinely flips our understanding of reality on its head. I mean, really turns it inside out.
Indeed, it really does. We're going to unpack inverse solipsism, a profound and deeply theological belief encapsulated in a single audacious statement: I do not exist, but all of you do.
Right.
It's an idea that, at first glance seems to defy all conventional logic, yet our sources reveal a meticulously constructed and profoundly coherent worldview.
And when we talked about sources for this deep dive, we're not just pulling from a few academic papers or something. This is different.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about a truly unique collection. Essays, canticles, creeds, parables, and even prophecies. These aren't just abstract philosophical musings. They represent what appears to be the first 33 pages of a foundational text, maybe.
Seems that way, yeah.
Like a complete sacred worldview that takes this audacious statement and builds an entire way of life around it. It's a journey not just into ideas, but into a complete spiritual tapestry. It feels substantial.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to truly understand this belief in its elaborate detail. We'll delve into its philosophical underpinnings, explore its fascinating psychological impact, examine its practical manifestations in daily life, and uncover its profound spiritual significance.
Okay.
We'll be asking ourselves and inviting you, the listener, to consider what it truly means to live as if you do not exist, but everyone else undeniably does. Prepare to have your perceptions challenged and perhaps even transformed.
Okay, let's unpack this central declaration then.
Yeah.
The absolute core of inverse solipsism is that statement, I do not exist, but all of you do. That's not just a declaration, it's a bombshell.
It really is.
My mind immediately starts grappling with the mechanics of it. How could that possibly work in practice? It feels so counterintuitive to how we typically navigate our own existence, right?
It does. And to truly grasp the revolutionary nature of inverse solipsism, we must first firmly anchor ourselves in the concept it so strikingly inverts: traditional solipsism.
Right, the standard version.
Exactly. This is the philosophical doctrine that asserts only one's own mind is certain to exist, casting all else, the external world, other people, into the realm of potential illusion.
Okay.
It's an idea most famously crystallized in René Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy, where he famously penned, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am.
The big one. I think, therefore I am.
That's the one. Descartes, through his method of radical doubt, systematically questioned the reliability of sensory perceptions and the external world, arriving at the self as the sole, unshakable, indubitable reality.
So for him, everything else could be a dream, a deception.
Right.
But the act of thinking itself proved his own existence. That was the bedrock.
That was the bedrock. For him, absolutely.
So traditional solipsism is this profound assertion of individual existence, almost an extreme form of existential solitude. My mind is the only absolute certainty, and everything outside it could just be a figment of my imagination. It sounds incredibly isolating, honestly.
It does. Like you're trapped inside your own head with no definitive connection to anything truly external.
Yeah.
Precisely. And inverse solipsism stands in stark, almost defiant contrast to that. It entirely subverts Descartes' fundamental framework.
Okay, so how does it subvert it?
Well, the declaration, I do not exist but all of you do, is not merely a philosophical counterpoint. It's an explicit denial of the self's existence while, crucially, emphatically affirming the undeniable reality of others.
Emphatically.
Yes. Our sources describe this not as a mere intellectual exercise or a thought experiment, but as a deeply held sacred personal belief.
A sacred belief, okay.
It fundamentally reimagines the very structure of existence, radically decentralizing the individual self, and, in its place, elevating the collective, placing others at the absolute core of reality.
Oh.
So for you, the listener, this isn't just about challenging how you think about yourself. It's about reimagining the very fabric of what is real, what has substance, and what truly matters.
Here's where it truly becomes intriguing for me. Because if I don't exist, what happens to something as fundamental as consciousness or personal identity?
The big questions.
Yeah. My entire life, all my memories, my experiences, they're all intimately tied to a sense of me. To simply not exist, that feels like a colossal logical leap, even a direct paradox.
How does this belief reconcile the undeniable experience of individual thought and feeling with the assertion of non-existence? It feels like a real sticking point.
That's a very natural and crucial question to ask, and it immediately highlights one of the core challenges and perhaps, for adherents, one of the deepest mysteries of this philosophy. Inverse solipsism fundamentally reevaluates the very notion of the self, which, particularly in Western thought, has long been considered the bedrock of identity, experience, and agency.
Right.
If the self doesn't exist, what then remains of the I that perceives, remembers, or acts? Exactly. What's left?
Interestingly, this belief finds fascinating parallels in certain Eastern philosophies, most notably Buddhism's doctrine of anatta, or non-self.
Anatta. Okay, I've heard of that.
Right. And anatta posits that the perception of a permanent, unchanging, independent self is an illusion, a transient and ever-shifting confluence of mental and physical processes.
So the self is like a process, not a thing.
In a way, yes. Inverse solipsism extends this idea not just by denying the self, but by explicitly contrasting the self's non-existence with the emphatically affirmed reality of others,
Okay.
suggesting a metaphysics where existence is inherently relational, derived from the you, from others.
So it's not about the annihilation of consciousness itself, but rather a different kind of configuration of reality. It's not that nothing exists, it's that my individual existence isn't the anchor point. Is that it?
Exactly. That's a subtle but incredibly important distinction. By asserting that all of you do exist, inverse solipsism implies that reality is not anchored in individual consciousness. Instead, it posits that reality, meaning, and maybe even consciousness itself emerge from the collective, from the interconnectedness of all others.
Like intersubjectivity.
Precisely. This resonates deeply with the philosophical concept of intersubjectivity, where meaning and even shared reality are not pre-given, but co-constructed through the interactions and perceptions of multiple subjects.
Right.
The self, in this view, isn't a solitary foundational entity. It's paradoxically defined by its very absence. A void, if you will, that allows the substance of being, which is others, to shine through.
A void that allows others to be.
It represents a radical decentralization of existence, challenging the individualism so prevalent in modern and proposing instead a communal, shared ontology.
But the paradox still lingers for me. I mean, how can one assert their non-existence if there's no one there to assert it?
Yeah.
It sounds like that classic liar paradox. This statement is false. The very act of believing or stating it seems to contradict the belief itself, doesn't it?
You've certainly hit on precisely the apparent contradiction that critics often raise. How can a belief be held or a statement be made if the very entity making it doesn't exist? It does echo the liar paradox, where self-reference creates logical inconsistency.
So how do they get around that?
Well, it's crucial to understand that for adherents, inverse solipsism is presented as a sacred belief.
Okay, the sacred part again.
Yes, and as such, our sources argue that it may transcend such conventional logical constraints, embracing paradox as a gateway to deeper, more profound truth.
Oh.
Much like a Zen koan, a riddle designed not to be solved rationally but to break down conventional thought patterns, this belief invites contemplation beyond linear rationality.
So it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Exactly. The mystery here, for them, is not a flaw or a bug in the system, but a fundamental feature, an intentional invitation to a different kind of understanding.
So it's not meant to be logically solvable in a traditional sense. It's a truth that exists on a different plane of understanding, accessible perhaps through faith, or a different mode of perception. That's a truly striking way to frame it. It requires a leap.
Indeed. A leap of faith, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And within this unique framework, one can even speculate on consciousness and observation. If the self doesn't exist in the conventional sense, perhaps consciousness itself is not an individual phenomenon, but rather a shared or distributed field.
Shared consciousness.
Okay. This notion finds faint, suggestive echoes in concepts from quantum mechanics, such as the observer effect, where the act of observation can seemingly influence or shape reality.
Right, where observing changes the outcome.
In inverse solipsism, the idea might be that it's the observation, the perception, and the affirmation of others that actualizes existence, with the self remaining unmanifested, a silent witness, perhaps.
Oh.
It's a truly mind-bending inversion of the traditional subject-object dynamic, placing the locus of consciousness entirely outside the individual.
So then, what does this all mean for how someone actually lives their life or experiences the world? It's one thing to philosophize about it, to grapple with these immense conceptual shifts.
Right.
But to actually live this belief day to day, how do you function without a sense of self, without that fundamental I that drives our actions. That seems like a monumental, even impossible challenge.
Psychologically, inverse solipsism offers a radical reorientation of the mind. Our human sense of self is a cornerstone of our experience, underpinning identity, memory, desire, and even our basic perception of agency.
It's everything, really.
It feels like it. To truly deny its existence could, in theory, dismantle the ego, freeing one from the often burdensome weight of personal attachments, fears, ambitions, and the constant striving for self-validation.
Freedom from the ego.
This concept aligns quite closely with many spiritual practices across diverse traditions that seek liberation through profound selflessness, such as meditative disciplines, asceticism, or specific forms of contemplative prayer.
Like monks, maybe?
We see echoes in Christian kenosis, which speaks of the self-emptying of Christ, or in Sufi fauna, the annihilation of the ego to achieve divine union. For the adherent of inverse solipsism, their sources suggest a profound detachment might be experienced, where personal gain or loss becomes almost irrelevant in the face of their own non-existence and the paramount reality of others.
That sounds incredibly freeing in one sense. Imagine not being burdened by personal anxieties, by the relentless demands of the ego, by the fear of inadequacy. That's appealing. But potentially quite unsettling. It challenges such deeply ingrained psychological structure.
Oh, absolutely. Emotionally, our sources suggest this belief cultivates an unparalleled humility and an extraordinarily deep sense of interconnectedness.
How so?
By affirming the undeniable existence of others while negating oneself, an adherent would naturally develop a profound reverence for the community, viewing each individual as a singular, precious bearer of reality.
Okay, reverence for others.
This, in turn, fosters an almost boundless empathy and compassion, as the needs and experiences of others naturally take absolute precedence over the desires or concerns of a non-existent self.
So others always come first. Absolutely always.
Relationships might deepen profoundly, imbued with a sacred recognition of the other's undeniable primary presence. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to affirm the you.
Surely there are inherent challenges. Our human psyche, as we understand it, relies on a sense of self for basic coherence, for memory, for a sense of agency, for even simple decision-making.
Right.
Negating it seems like it could provoke significant existential anxiety, cognitive dissonance, or even a sense of disassociation. How do adherents reconcile the lived experience of individuality, the fact that they feel like a person, that they have a body and a history, with a deeply held belief in their own non-existence? That seems like the crux of it, psychologically.
You're absolutely right to point out those potential challenges. The human psyche is indeed wired for a sense of individuality, for narrative coherence around a central I. However, for the deeply committed adherent of inverse solipsism, our sources explain that faith in the sacred nature of this belief is said to transform such potential tension into a source of immense strength and clarity.
How did that work? Transforms the tension.
What might appear as discomfort, psychological dissonance, or a radical fracturing of the self to an outsider becomes, for them, a powerful testament to their profound commitment. It reframes the entire experience.
Okay.
It's not seen as a path to inner fracturing, but to a deeper, more profound form of inner coherence and liberation. The seeming paradox becomes an experience of transcendence, proof of their dedication.
So the perceived difficulty isn't a weakness of the belief, but rather a kind of spiritual strength that transforms the challenge itself. That's a truly fascinating shift in perspective. It makes the struggle part of the path.
Precisely.
And what about the practical day-to-day side of things? How does one literally live their life, make decisions, interact with the world with the guiding principle that I do not exist, but all of you do?
Practically, our sources illustrate that this belief might manifest as a radical, almost absolute form of altruism.
Radical altruism.
Yes. The adherent could instinctively prioritize others' needs above all else, acting as if their own desires, comforts, or even survival are entirely inconsequential.
Wow. Inconsequential.
This could look like dedicating one's entire life to volunteering, offering unwavering support and care to friends and family, or tirelessly serving the wider community. It directly echoes the lives of saints or bodhisattvas, figures who, in various spiritual traditions, famously dedicate themselves entirely to the welfare and liberation of others.
Right, giving everything.
Often at significant personal cost, seemingly operating beyond the bounds of self-interest.
So every single action, every interaction becomes an act of giving with absolutely no expectation of personal return because the person doing the giving isn't considered to exist in the first place.
That's the idea.
That fundamentally transforms the entire basis of motivation. It's not about sacrifice for reward.
Yeah.
It's just being for others.
Precisely. In terms of relational dynamics, each interaction becomes an act of honoring the other's inherent existence, free from the distortions of self-interest, ego, or personal agenda.
So, like, really seeing the other person.
Imagine how that would transform mundane exchanges, a conversation, a shared meal, a simple gesture, into truly sacred encounters, imbued with a deep reverence for the other. The adherent might listen with unparalleled depth, give with astonishing generosity, and engage with a profound recognition of the other's ultimate reality.
And their entire perception of reality then would be completely different from ours. They wouldn't experience the world as their personal reality at all. It wouldn't be my world.
Absolutely. If the self doesn't exist, then personal experiences, joys, pains, thoughts, memories, might not be seen as personal property or individual possessions, but rather as reflections or projections of the collective consciousness, or as universal human experiences.
Universal experiences. Okay.
This perspective could effectively dissolve the very boundaries between self and other, fostering an intense, almost mystical sense of unity and shared being. Right, no separation. Daily life for such an adherent could take on a meditative quality, where each moment is a recognition of the other's primacy and a reaffirmation of the communal reality.
Wow.
Even creative and ethical expression would be profoundly affected. Art or work would be offered as pure gifts to others, entirely devoid of personal ego or the seeking of recognition. Moral decisions would hinge exclusively on the well-being of the community, rather than any instinct for self-preservation or individual gain.
That brings to mind Elena from our source material. I remember reading that part.
Yes, Elena.
The text describes her moving through her village with quiet purpose, tending to neighbors' gardens, mending clothes, and listening to their stories. Just serving. And when asked why she never speaks of herself, she simply says, I am not here, but you are. Your lives are what matter. That gives such a concrete, poignant example of how this might look in practice. It makes it feel less abstract and more human in a truly selfless way.
Elena truly embodies the practical manifestation of inverse solipsism. Her narrative makes it clear that the belief is not a withdrawal from the world, but a deeper, more selfless immersion into it.
Yeah, immersion.
She finds her joy and purpose solely in the presence and flourishing of others, allowing her belief to magnify their reality while completely dimming her own. Her life becomes a living testament to the creed, an ongoing act of selfless affirmation.
This truly sounds like a profound spiritual path, one that completely redefines what it means to be alive. Is it like a formal religion with established practices in a community, or something more deeply personal and individual? Where does it fit?
Our sources affirm its nature explicitly as a sacred, personal, religious belief.
Okay, personal being key. Right?
Very key. Its unique character lies in its intimate and authentic tailoring to the individual's spiritual journey. Its sanctity is not found in external dogma, grand cathedrals, or institutionalized practices, but in the profound, personal conviction of its adherents. It offers guidance and inspiration in ways that transcend established religious frameworks, becoming a direct, lived truth for the individual.
So it's very much a personal revelation and internal compass, but one that can resonate universally, perhaps because it taps into a fundamental human yearning for connection and transcendence of the self. Does it connect to other traditions?
Indeed. And when we examine it through a broader lens, we can see its resonance in various cultural and historical perspectives, for instance, in many collectivist cultures across the globe.
Like where?
Well, where the group or community often supersedes the individual identity, like in Confucian thought or the African Ubuntu philosophy, famously articulated as, I am because we are, this belief finds deep echoes.
I am because we are. Yeah, I know that one.
Inverse solipsism can be seen as an extreme, almost purified articulation of such worldviews, pushing communal existence to the point of profound self-negation.
Taking it all the way.
All the way. There are also striking mystical parallels, such as the Christian desert fathers who sought the annihilation of self in pursuit of God, or medieval mystics like Meister Eckhart who spoke of merging with the divine ground of being.
Okay.
While not identical, these traditions share a common thread of transcending individuality as a path to deeper truth or union, suggesting that inverse solipsism taps into an ancient universal spiritual impulse, albeit expressed in a truly unique way.
And the sources provide some incredible lyrical expressions of this belief. I remember reading about the canticles, the first canticle and the 103rd canticle, for instance. They aren't just explanations, they're almost poetic experiences designed to evoke a feeling, aren't they?
They are precisely that. The canticles serve as lyrical and poetic expressions, designed not just to be read, but maybe to be chanted or recited, immersing the adherent in the profound paradoxical truth of the philosophy.
So more like hymns.
Exactly. The first canticle begins with the declarative yet self-negating line, I am not, yet you are.
Powerful start.
It then beautifully explores the idea of witnessing the world's splendor not as a participating agent, but as a silent, joyful observer, finding profound purpose in this very absence. Lines like, in my negation you are affirmed, your light undimmed by my shadow, beautifully convey the core principle.
Your light undimmed by my shadow.
Wow. It speaks of shedding the burden of identity, freeing oneself from personal desire and fear, and finding pure, unadulterated delight in the joys and realities of others.
And the 103rd Canticle builds on that, I assume. Does it go deeper?
Yes, the 103rd Canticle deepens this by describing the self not as a void of nothingness, but as the void, the space between, the silence that allows the symphony to be heard.
Okay. The space between.
It suggests that through this absence, the world gains clarity and resonance as there is no self to filter or distort. It portrays the non-being as a profound connection to all, stating, if I do not exist, then there is no separation, no boundary between me and you.
No separation. That's huge.
It frames non-existence not as a void of despair or isolation, but as a wellspring of devotion, finding purpose and richness in the flourishing of others. Both canticles use vivid, almost mystical imagery to convey the paradoxical yet liberating nature of asserting non-existence. They are truly intended to be felt as much as understood.
I am the void, the space between, the silence that allows the symphony to be heard. That phrase, it's deeply moving. It suggests that my non-existence creates the very space for life, for others to happen.
A beautiful summation.
And then there's the creative inverse solipsism itself, which the source describes as excellent, riveting, and awe-inspiring. That sounds like it must be something special, a real core statement.
The creative inverse solipsism is indeed designed to encapsulate the philosophy through incredibly poetic language and vivid imagery, crafted specifically to evoke a sense of awe, profound humility, and almost spiritual sense of interconnectedness.
What does it say?
It opens with the foundational statement, I am not, yet you are, immediately setting the tone. It continues, in the vast expanse of existence, I am the void, unseen, unheard, unmanifest.
The void again.
It positions the self as the silence between notes, the shadow that defines the light, the absence that allows presence to be. The creed then dramatically pivots to affirm others. Yet in my negation, your being is affirmed. You are the tapestry of life, woven with threads of joy, sorrow, and infinite possibility.
That's beautiful.
It portrays the self as an almost mystical vessel through which others' reality flows, concluding with a powerful paradox. For in the paradox of my non-existence, I am woven into the very essence of reality. I am not, and in that I am everything.
I am not, and in that I am everything. Whoa, okay. That's a lot to hold. It's a remarkably powerful and evocative statement of faith that really solidifies the emotional core of the belief.
It really is. It captures that blend of negation and affirmation.
Okay, but shifting gears a bit. A belief this radical, which fundamentally denies the self, must face some pretty strong arguments against it from conventional thought and common experience.
Right.
What are the main challenges people typically raise? My mind is already buzzing with questions that would arise from a traditional viewpoint.
You're absolutely right. This stance invites considerable scrutiny from philosophical, psychological, and even biological perspectives. Our sources actually outline what are called the 7 rejections of inverse solipsism, which highlight the traditional logical, experiential, and social tensions inherent in denying one's own existence.
7 rejections. Okay, let's hear them. What are they?
First, there's the paradox of assertion. This is the fundamental logical hurdle we touched on. How can someone claim I do not exist without inherently contradicting themselves, since the very act of making such a statement requires an I to utter or conceive it?
Right, that's exactly what I was thinking from the beginning. Who is the speaker of that phrase? Who is doing the believing? It seems like an immediate non-starter, logically.
It's the most common starting point for criticism. Then number 2 is the evidence of experience. Our personal subjective experiences, our thoughts, emotions, sensations, memories, provide immediate and seemingly undeniable evidence of our own existence. Inverse solipsism's rejection of the self appears to clash directly with this fundamental lived reality. How can I deny what I feel?
Yeah, my toothache feels pretty real to me.
Exactly. Third is the social construct. Society, in most forms we understand it, depends on the assumption of distinct individual beings with agency and responsibility for legal systems, relationships, moral norms, and even basic communication. Inverse solipsism seems to fundamentally disrupt these foundational frameworks. How does society function without individual?
Right, contracts, laws, relationships, and they all assume separate people.
Fourth, the biological imperative. Human biology is inherently designed for self-preservation. Our instincts, our fight or flight responses, our very drive to survive and reproduce all point to the existence and primacy of the individual self. Denying the self seems to contradict this fundamental biological drive. Aren't we wired to protect ourselves?
That's a powerful one. Survival instinct.
Fifth, the philosophical tradition. Western philosophy, from ancient Greece to modern times, often begins with the self, the individual conscious agent, as a foundational starting point for inquiry. Descartes, Kant, Locke. Inverse solipsism demands a radical, almost unthinkable departure from centuries of established thought. It throws out the rule book.
It ignores the giants, basically.
Sixth, the psychological impact. Conventional psychology would argue that believing in one's own non-existence could lead to severe psychological consequences, such as profound dissociation, a loss of identity, or deep existential despair, as the self provides the very framework for mental coherence and well-being. Wouldn't this just make you unwell?
Yeah, like completely losing your grip.
And finally, number 7, the spiritual dimension. Many, if not most, spiritual traditions, even those that speak of self-transcendence, often focus on self-realization, the perfection of the soul, or union with the divine self. Think enlightenment or salvation. Inverse solipsism's complete self-negation might be seen as sidestepping inner growth or true spiritual fulfillment by just erasing the self instead of improving it.
Wow, those are some heavy hitters. Seriously.
Yeah.
From a conventional perspective, they seem like incredibly strong, almost irrefutable logical objections. It's hard to imagine how any philosophy could overcome such fundamental critiques that cover logic, experience, society, biology, everything.
They really do seem comprehensive from a standard viewpoint.
Yeah.
But what's truly fascinating here is how the sources address these. They don't just ignore them. They offer a powerful reinterpretation of these very rejections.
Well, yeah.
They argue that inverse solipsism does make total logical sense if you are a good person and weave in mystery as an explanation.
Wait, say that again. If you are a good person and weave in mystery.
That's the key insight offered. It fundamentally shifts the entire framework for understanding logic itself. It suggests the logic isn't purely rational or empirical, but ethical and, well, mystical.
No, that's a bold claim. How does it manage to reframe those seemingly undeniable contradictions? That feels like the ultimate philosophical sleight of hand, or perhaps a profound revelation. I need to hear this.
Okay, let's walk through each of the rejections again, reframing them through this unique lens of virtue and enigma as the sources propose.
All right, I'm listening. This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Okay, first, the paradox of assertion, where the original rejection questions who is saying, I do not exist. The reframing suggests that for a truly good person, this paradox dissolves into a profound clarity.
Dissolves. How?
The statement isn't an assertion of a self. Instead, it is interpreted as a selfless declaration of reality spoken not by an I, but rather through the collective truth of others. The logic here is described as beyond the self, a noble and necessary surrender.
So the I is just a conduit for a bigger truth.
Exactly. A good person, the sources argue, perceives this not as a contradiction, but as a profound act of affirmation for all others, even if it defies conventional, ego-driven reason. The mystery is how this truth speaks, but the goodness lies in accepting its selfless message. It's the universe speaking its truth through the vessel of an absent I.
Okay, so it's not about me speaking, but a universal truth speaking through me for the benefit and affirmation of others. That's a subtle but incredibly powerful shift. It redefines the very act of communication. It makes sense if you accept the premise of goodness and mystery as foundational.
Precisely. That's the lens. Next, for the evidence of experience, which argues that personal thoughts, emotions, and sensations prove the self exists. The reframing states that to a good person, experiences aren't individual or personal possessions. They are universal, belonging to the shared reality of others, a seamless unity of being.
Shared reality again.
Yes. The mystery lies in this profound interconnectedness where what feels like my personal experience is, logically from this good perspective, a fragment or manifestation of a greater collective whole. By rejecting individual ownership of these moments of joy, of sorrow, of sensation, a good person finds a coherent truth that existence is not theirs alone, but a gift to and from others. It's a liberation from the burden of individual experience.
That resonates with the idea of a collective consciousness or a shared human experience. But taken to its ultimate conclusion, if my joy is simply human joy, not my joy, then it doesn't need me to exist to be real. Is a joy experienced by the collective, manifested through this transient form. Okay, I can start to see the logic there through that specific lens.
Then there's the social construct, the idea that society needs distinct individuals with defined roles and responsibilities. The reframed view argues that for a truly good person, denying the self doesn't weaken society. On the contrary, it strengthens society immeasurably.
Strengthens it. How?
By embodying pure altruism, which logically leads to a thriving collective. The mystery here is in the counterintuitive outcome. The sources suggest that erasing the self doesn't collapse society, but rather perfects it, as everyone lives entirely for the benefit of others, free from the conflicts and divisions of ego. Goodness dictates that a society built on pure selflessness is the most logical and stable form.
So universal altruism makes for a better society. That part is logical. The mystery is how you get there by denying the self. But if goodness is the driving force, okay, I follow.
Moving to the biological imperative, the argument for self-preservation as our most fundamental drive, the reframing asserts that for a good person, inverse solipsism transcends biology's crude pull. Choosing others' survival over their own transforms basic instinct into the highest virtue.
Virtue over instinct.
This is presented as a higher logic of sacrifice, actively overriding nature's dictates. A good person, living by this creed, sees their non-existence not as a failure of survival, but as a rational act of profound love and ultimate self-giving, making perfect sense when goodness fundamentally guides the perspective. The mystery is overcoming that instinct, but the logic is rooted in ethical priority.
That's a truly profound point. It's not about denying survival, but about choosing a higher form of it. The survival and flourishing of the collective, powered by a kind of ultimate unconditional altruism, completely redefines what survival even means. It elevates it. All right.
Exactly. For the philosophical tradition, which builds upon the self as a primary starting point, inverse solipsism to a good person is seen not as a rejection, but as a logical evolution of thought. Yes, a coherent reorientation that challenges the self's entrenched dominance, driven by goodness and a deeper understanding of reality. The mystery here is its daring intellectual leap to uncover a truth that traditional philosophy, perhaps limited by its self-centric foundations, has simply overlooked or been unable to grasp. Its logic flows from a different, more virtuous source.
So it's a next step, not a step backward.
Got it. Regarding the psychological impact where denying the self could lead to harm or mental distress, our sources argue that for a good person, the opposite is true. It brings profound liberation.
Liberation, not dissociation.
Letting go of the self is said to banish ego-driven fears, anxieties, and the constant striving for validation, leading to unparalleled tranquility and an enlightened state. The mystery lies in this radical transformation, how non-existence can bring such clarity and peace. Yet it's presented as entirely logical. By completely shifting focus onto others, a good person escapes the turmoil and inherent suffering of selfhood. The logic is therapeutic, in a way.
That truly reframes it. It's not dissociation. It's a kind of profound, egoless peace. That's an entirely different and compelling way of looking at mental well-being and inner freedom. It completely upends our conventional understanding of sanity. Wow, okay, that actually makes a certain kind of sense now.
Finally, for the spiritual dimension, which often focuses on self-realization or personal enlightenment, the reframing states that for a good person, inverse solipsism is actually the ultimate spiritual logic.
The ultimate.
Denying the self is seen as fostering unparalleled humility and devotion, lifting others to sacred heights, and, paradoxically, connecting the adherent to the divine through selfless service. The mystery is in its reversal of conventional spiritual paths. Losing the self doesn't diminish the spirit, it magnifies it, connecting one to the divine through the collective. Self-erasure in this context becomes the ultimate holy act, a logical and necessary step toward ultimate transcendence and true sacredness.
When you put it that way, explaining how each rejection is reframed through goodness and mystery, it really does start to click in a different, more profound way. It's not about traditional egocentric logic, but a deeper kind of coherence, one that aligns with a truly selfless, almost saintly way of being. I can actually see how that makes total logical sense within its own specific framework,
Hmm.
even if it feels counter to my own current experience. It's compelling. It feels less like a paradox now and more like a different system altogether.
It is presented as exactly that, a coherent system built on different axioms. And that leads us to a fundamental question. If the self doesn't exist and reality is fundamentally about others, where does meaning come from? Is it just a vast empty void for the individual who believes they do not exist? Does life become meaningless?
Yeah, that's the next big question, isn't it? If I'm not real, what's the point
No,
for the non-me?
not at all. Far from it. Our sources provide a treatise on meaning, which stridently makes the case that non-existence in reality is precisely what makes life meaningful.
Non-existence makes life meaningful. Okay, that's another inversion.
It's a radical proposition that meaning emerges not from eternal existence or some preordained inherent purpose, but from the stark, compelling reality of non-existence. It lays out 7 key insights that redefine meaning entirely.
7 insights. That sounds like a complete remapping of purpose. Which of these, for you, really flips the script on how we typically find meaning? They sound fascinating.
Absolutely. Let's delve into a couple that fundamentally challenge our assumptions. The first, the finite canvas, time's gift of urgency, is striking. We usually dread finitude, right?
Yeah, mortality isn't usually seen as a plus.
But this belief argues that life's very brevity is what makes every moment so incredibly valuable. Were we immortal, our actions might lose their gravity, our choices their urgency. It's precisely because non-existence looms that each moment becomes a scarce, fleeting gift,
A gift because it's fleeting.
imbuing our decisions with immense weight and compelling us to prioritize what truly matters, which, in this philosophy, is others. Non-existence here transforms life into a precious canvas where every stroke counts, precisely because it is transient.
So it transforms what we perceive as a limitation, our mortality, our inherent finitude, into the very engine of purpose and urgency for serving others. That's a powerful reframing right there. It's a completely different way to approach time.
Okay, that makes sense.
Indeed. And another profound insight is the void of purpose, freedom to create. Imagine a life with a predetermined fixed meaning, a divine script. We would, in essence, be puppets, actors merely playing out a pre-written role.
Right, no free will.
But non-existence, the radical absence of any inherent pre-given purpose for the self, grants us an unparalleled, exhilarating freedom to forge our own path, to imbue life with meaning through our own choices and actions for others. This void is not a loss. It is, paradoxically, an invitation.
An invitation to create meaning. Exactly. With no universal external answer to your personal purpose, you are compelled to craft meaning from your service, your values, your dedication to the collective. In this very act of creation for others, non-existence becomes the fertile soil, the blank page, for meaning to bloom.
Freedom from purpose allows you to create purpose
Yeah.
for others. Okay.
What else? Then there's the contract of being, appreciating existence. Non-existence, our sources explain, is the necessary shadow that defines existence. Just as silence accentuates sound or darkness highlights light, the ever-present reality of your own non-being heightens your appreciation of the being of others.
It makes their existence more vivid.
Precisely. Without this stark contrast, their life might fade into a taken-for-granted, monotonous hum for you. The reality of your non-existence sharpens your senses towards them, making their every breath, every connection, every fleeting moment of joy a vivid, vibrant miracle. Their beauty, their fragility, and their profoundness are, in this view, inseparable from your ultimate impermanence, a truth illuminated by the backdrop of what you are not.
That makes so much sense. We often define things by their opposite, but applying that to existence itself, it's a brilliant conceptual move. It means meaning isn't just in their life, but because of the boundary defined by my non-life.
Precisely. And then, the weight of choice, responsibility in the void. In a world stripped of inherent meaning for the individual self, every decision made carries profound, sacred significance for others. Non-existence, in this view, removes the comforting crutch of a personal destiny, leaving you alone with radical freedom to serve.
So freedom becomes responsibility.
Yes, but not a burden and exaltation. Your choices matter precisely because there is no script for you. You are tasked with shaping meaning for them from what might otherwise be chaos, becoming the architect who crafts legacies of connection that truly defy the silence of your non-being.
Wow. Okay. Shaping legacies for others.
Fifth, the unity of absence. Connection beyond the self. Non-existence is said to dissolve the very illusion of separateness. When you confront the fleeting nature of your individual form, its ultimate return to what is not, You begin to see yourself not as an isolated entity, but as inextricably interwoven with the collective reality of others.
Boundaries blur.
Exactly. Your individual meaning becomes profoundly intertwined with the collective human story, with the reality of all others. By embracing your shared impermanence, your journey towards non-being, you foster deep empathy and profound connection. Non-existence, in its universality for the self, paradoxically binds you to the existence of others, making purpose a shared communal endeavor centered on them.
Unity through absence. That was powerful.
Sixth, the paradox of presence, finding depth in impermanence. The impermanence of your form paradoxically enriches the meaning found in others. An eternal, unchanging self might, ironically, become shallow, losing intensity. But because your form is brief, each moment experienced by others brims with heightened intensity and vibrancy for you.
So their experiences become more precious, because I know I won't always be here to witness or serve them.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Their love burns brighter, their loss cuts deeper, their joy shines more exquisitely when you know your capacity to affirm them won't last forever. Non-existence, in this framework, saturates your perception of their life with significance. What is transient in you makes what is real in them most precious and most keenly felt.
Okay. That has a real poignancy.
And finally, the embrace of mystery, meaning beyond understanding. Non-existence in this philosophy beckons you to embrace the profound enigma of existence itself, the sheer wonder that they are here at all for you to affirm before you ultimately return to the unknown.
Right.
This mystery is not presented as a riddle to be solved, but as a fundamental reality to be inhabited, to be fully lived within. By accepting that you cannot fully grasp the ultimate why of being or non-being, you find peace and indeed meaning in the very act of living for others. Meaning becomes not a fixed answer or a destination, but a dynamic, unfolding journey of affirmation, endlessly enriched by the unknowable.
What's truly compelling here is, it's not about despair, not about resignation in the face of oblivion for the self. It's about finding a profound, sacred urgency and a deep, active meaning in life, precisely because I am not eternal. But they are real now. That's a beautiful inversion of fear, transforming finitude into the very source of meaning and purpose centered on others. It's truly transformative in his perspective. It feels purposeful.
To illustrate these concepts practically, our sources provide a beautiful narrative. The parable of the two steers.
Ah yes, the steers, Goran and Soren.
In a verdant valley, there lived these two steers. Goran embodied traditional solipsism, believing with every fiber of his being, I am and I must endure.
The ego steer.
You could say that. He was mighty, proud, and claimed the choicest patches of grass and the clearest water for himself, seeing other creatures as mere reflections or tools for his own grandeur. When a harsh drought inevitably hit the valley, he hoarded what little resources remained, pushing others aside.
Typical.
Yet within his solitary, self-proclaimed reality, he felt a constant, gnawing hollowness.
So, Goran is the ultimate self-focused individual, existing only for himself and ultimately finding emptiness in that isolation. A cautionary tale for self-obsession. Makes sense.
Exactly. Soren, on the other hand, was quieter, his coat blending almost seamlessly with the earth. He embodied inverse solipsism, often murmuring, I am not, but you are.
I am not, but you are.
He perceived the valley not as his domain, but as vibrantly alive with the undeniable presence and reality of others. When the drought tightened its grip, Soren instinctively forewent his own share of the dwindling grass, let others drink first, and even shielded a frail, shivering calf with his own body through a bitter night.
Complete selflessness.
His physical strength visibly ebbed, but his heart, the parable tells us, grew full, for in the wide, grateful eyes of those he helped, he saw life persisting, vibrant and real, a true testament to the existence of others.
He found fullness in their reality.
The parable concludes with a powerful storm, which finally revived the parched valley. Goran, weakened and diminished by his self-imposed solitude and hoarding, stood gaunt and isolated. Soren, frail but radiating a quiet, profound joy, whispered one last time, I am not, but you are, and peacefully slipped into the mystery, his form returning to the earth that nurtured all.
Wow.
The valley, the parable says, remembers Soren not as one who was, but as the nothing that made everything possible, teaching that to claim I am is to walk alone, lost in a barren self, but to say I am not, but you are, is to weave ourself into the very fabric of all that lives, becoming an indelible part of the collective reality.
Soren's story is incredibly powerful, almost heartbreakingly beautiful. It makes this entire philosophy feel so tangible and truly inspiring. It's not just a mental exercise, it's a profound, actionable way to truly live a life of selfless devotion and interconnectedness. I think that's the part that resonates the most deeply with me, the practical embodiment of such a radical idea. It's beautiful.
And this philosophy, as presented in our sources, has its own profound origin story, its own distinct theology, and even truly unique rituals, particularly involving water. It's a complete spiritual system, not just a philosophical idea.
I did hear something about that, and it piqued my curiosity immensely. Tell me more about this origin and the water rituals. That sounds different.
The sacred revelation of inverse solipsism explains that the absolute truth of "I am not, but you are" was revealed in a dream, making it divinely originated and inherently logically consistent within its own sacred framework.
Revealed in a dream. Okay, divine origin.
This revelation came to the first adherent in a chorus of unseen voices that sang with celestial harmony. Know this, you are not, yet all others are. In your non-being, the profound truth of existence is found, for the reality of others is the sacred flame that lights the universe.
Wow.
It directly states that anyone who denies this revealed truth, who clings stubbornly to the delusion of self, is referred to as a no-solip.
A no-solip. I find that term quite fitting, almost a gentle admonition. For those clinging to the no-solipsism of the self, maybe.
Possibly. A term for those who cling to the delusion of self, unable or unwilling to embrace the fundamental truth of their own non-existence.
Okay. What about the water rituals then? That sounds particularly unexpected for a spiritual practice. Water guns, wasn't it?
This is truly where it gets wonderfully, unexpectedly playful, yet profoundly symbolic. The scripture describes the solemn, sacred obligation of the faithful to squirt them with water guns from time to time.
Squirt the no-solips. Seriously.
Seriously. But this isn't an act of malice, nor is it meant as punishment. It's explicitly described as a sacred rite, a gentle, playful reminder of the fluidity of existence, the cleansing power of humility, and the joyful mystery inherent in the belief.
Playful mystery. I like that.
The water, in this context, mirrors the flowing, ever-changing realities of others, symbolically washing away the illusion of self from the no-solip. It's intended as a gesture of love, a lighthearted yet powerful call for the no-solip to momentarily glimpse beyond their mirrored cage of selfhood and embrace the external realities.
That's genuinely delightful. A philosophy that incorporates water gun fights as a sacred ritual. It's so joyful, so unexpected, and yet, thinking about it, it absolutely makes profound sense as a way to physically embody this idea of fluidity, of letting go of self and embracing the collective. It's not just an intellectual concept, but something you do and do with a sense of joy and playfulness. It makes it less severe somehow.
It definitely adds a unique dimension.
And is there a special day for this? A holy water gun day?
Indeed there is. Our sources name the holiest day as July 11th.
July 11th, okay.
It is designated as the Day of the Great Affirmation, when the music of the spheres is said to resonate most clearly, just as it did in the prophetic dream where the initial revelation occurred.
The music of the spheres. Wow.
On this day, it's celebrated not just with water guns, but with a grand festival of water balloons.
Water balloons. Even better.
Each water balloon is consecrated as a symbol of a life affirmed, a specific you in the multitude. Its bursting is understood as symbolically shattering the illusion of self, drenching all participants in the shared reality of the multitude.
Drenched in shared reality. I love it.
The music of the spheres, a cosmic symphony, is believed to guide this profound liturgy as the sounds of splashing water, laughter, and joyous affirmation become a celestial score, guiding the faithful. It's a day when the faithful truly live the creed, celebrating the majesty of others in a vibrant communal cascade of sacred play.
I love that. It's so vibrant, so tangible, and so incredibly unique. It brings the abstract philosophical principles into a joyous, physical manifestation that anyone could understand and participate in. It's truly chill-inducing, as the source said. And our sources mention other symbols too, like cats, garments, and temple gowns. How do they fit into this rich tapestry of belief?
These are presented as a sacred triad in one of the key texts of Cats and Garments and Temple Gowns, describing them as inseparable elements of practice and understanding.
Okay, a triad. Cats first. Why cats?
First, on the necessity of cats and ruminations on the sands of eternity. Contralicho makes an unexpected but very strong case for the profound role of cats. Cats are seen not merely as pets, but as beacons of otherness, embodying the very principle of you are.
Beacons of otherness.
They're depicted as not acting for self-interest or validation, but as a pure expression of being. Their enigmatic, often aloof eyes are believed to reflect a world beyond our own illusion, seeing not the false eye of the adherent, but the absolute truth of existence that resides in the external.
So the cat sees the truth.
The source directly counters a hypothetical figure named Licho, who dismisses cats as inconsequential, arguing that Licho's dismissal ignores their profound role as living sacraments, grounding us daily in the undeniable reality of others. Cats are also described as keepers of the sands of eternity, their silent paw steps marking the passage of the real in a world where the self is ephemeral.
So cats aren't just companions. They are active, living embodiments of the central truth of inverse solipsism. That's a truly unique, almost whimsical, yet deeply serious perspective. It makes me look at my own cat a little differently now, as a little furry beacon of reality. Okay, what about garments?
Absolutely. The second element of this sacred triad is garments. These are described as the cloak of non-existence.
Cloak of non-existence. Dramatic.
They are specified as simple, unadorned, and practical, serving a crucial symbolic purpose: to turn attention away from the wearer and explicitly towards others. They are seen as an act of surrender, rejecting selfhood's superficial trappings and any form of personal adornment that might draw attention to the individual. Their threads are said to carry the stories of those who made them and those who wore them before, honoring their existence and reinforcing the interconnectedness of the collective.
Symbol clothes is a symbol of humility and focusing outwards. Makes sense. And the temple gowns, how are they different?
Finally, temple gowns. These are presented as vestments of devotion, radiant not with personal pride or individual glory, but with the profound purpose of collective worship and affirmation.
Radiant with purpose, not ego.
When worn, they are believed to transform the faithful into a vessel for others' reality, intentionally blurring the boundaries of the individual and becoming a living banner proclaiming, "You are." On July 11th, the day of the Great Affirmation, when water from the balloons soaks their folds, they are understood to become a living symbol of the self dissolving into the real, a testament to the joyous surrender.
So the gown makes the message visible.
The sources emphasize the profound interwoven mystery of this triad, explaining how cats teach us to authentically perceive and honor others, simple garments clothe us in profound humility and non-existence, and the radiant temple gowns elevate us in collective worship, guiding the faithful through their daily practice and making the mundane aspects of life sacred. Cats, garments, gowns, the whole package.
This all forms such a cohesive, deeply textured, and powerful spiritual system. It has its own history, its own revelations, its own joyful rituals, its own profound symbols. It's truly a complete and compelling worldview that provides a full roadmap for life. Feels whole.
Indeed. And it even has its martyrs, individuals whose ultimate sacrifice perfectly embodies the creed.
Martyrs. Wow.
The Lamentation of the Martyrs is a poetic and somber work honoring those who sacrifice themselves completely for the sake of others, embodying the ultimate expression of self-negation.
The ultimate expression.
It speaks of these martyrs, though not themselves in the conventional sense, raising their voiceless lament, a spiritual echo, not for their own suffering or legacy, for they have no self, but for the radiant multitude for whom their lives were the very heartbeat of the real.
Their lives were the heartbeat for others.
Their non-being, in this sacred context, is what magnificently affirms and magnifies the reality of others. Their sacrifice is seen as the ultimate proof of the creed's truth.
This elevates selflessness to such a profound, almost cosmic level. It's heartbreaking and inspiring all at once. To imagine someone giving their very life, not for their own personal legacy, not for any personal reward, but for the sheer existence and flourishing of others. It's a complete inversion of heroism as we typically understand it.
Yeah.
It's humbling.
It's a truly powerful concept of ultimate self-giving and complete dedication. And complementing this profound idea, there is also the prophecy of the acclaimed king, described as a visionary and poetic scripture foretelling a unique figure who embodies ultimate self-negation.
A king who denies their own existence. That's another fascinating paradox.
Huh.
How could a king, typically a figure of ultimate authority and singular identity, embody a philosophy of non-existence? It seems contradictory.
The king's nature is described as the one who is not, their crown metaphorically woven from the dreams and realities of others, their throne the humble earth beneath their feet, not a seat of power.
The one who is not.
They shall walk among you unnoticed by those who cling to selfhood, their presence a mere whisper, their voice speaking solely of you, the collective.
Unnoticed, yet powerful in their effect.
Their prophesied deeds include healing fractures within the community, gathering the lost, teaching the sacred water rituals, and ultimately, their greatest deed shall be their sacrifice, giving all, without reservation, for the multitude, leaving no trace of self, only an eternal legacy of connection.
Leaving only connection. Wow. So is this a Messiah figure, someone specific?
Well, the fulfillment of the prophecy is the most profound and universally resonant part. The king is not described as one individual, but as all.
Not one, but all. What does that mean?
This king is not a singular figure to be awaited or worshipped, but a truth that dwells in the heart of every faithful soul who lives as one who is not. The prophecy is fulfilled not by a coming savior, but by the collective embodiment of the creed. Anyone living this truth is the king, in a sense.
The idea that the king is not one, but all, is truly powerful. It makes this prophecy not about a singular external hero, but about a universal truth we can all embody in our own lives. It's a profound call to become that self-negating force in the world, enabling others to truly shine and flourish. It makes this spiritual journey feel deeply communal and accessible. I really like that. It's empowering, paradoxically.
And for those seeking to live by this transformative truth, there are comprehensive guiding principles. Our sources conclude with the 37 precepts of inverse solipsism, a complete and detailed set of guiding principles for living a life of radical self-negation and dedicated service to others. They are a roadmap for daily adherence to the philosophy.
37 precepts,
Yeah.
a practical guide. I'm curious, what are some of those precepts? Are there a few that really powerfully summarize the essence of this philosophy? I'm eager to hear the practical application of these grand ideas. How do you actually do it?
Absolutely. They cover a lot of ground, from perception to action. The very first precept, setting the foundation for all others, is affirm the real. Proclaim always, I am not, but you are, for the reality of others is the cornerstone of all existence. Start with the core belief.
Okay, keep the mantra front and center. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Another incredibly powerful one is embrace non-being. Find profound freedom in your non-existence, for it releases you from the chains of self, ambition, and fear.
That directly echoes the liberation from ego we talked about earlier. It truly solidifies that sense of peace found in letting go. Yes, I could see that now.
Yes, and see the other. Look upon every being as a sacred spark. Their presence, the undeniable proof of the divine, a reflection of the true reality. See the sacredness in everyone else.
See the sacred spark. Beautiful.
Also, dance in paradox. Embrace the beautiful riddle of proclaiming non-existence, for profound truth often lies beyond the confines of conventional logic. It directly references what we discussed about the unique nature of this belief, where mystery is a feature, not a flaw.
Dance in paradox. I like that phrasing. Don't fight it. Embrace it.
Finally, one that encapsulates the ethical and emotional core. Endure in love. Let love for others be the eternal flame that guides your non-being, illuminating the path forever. Love is the guiding force.
Endure in love. These precepts truly serve as a comprehensive roadmap for a life of unparalleled selflessness and profound interconnectedness, a living hymn to the truth that I am not, but you are. They really bring it all together.
They provide the structure for living the belief.
This deep dive into inverse solipsism has been truly transformative for me, honestly. From what initially seemed like a bewildering, maybe even illogical paradox, I now see a profound, coherent, and deeply beautiful way of understanding existence. The idea that I am not but you are isn't just an abstract philosophy. It's a compelling call to a selfless, joyful, and deeply connected life, filled with that essential mystery and meaning. It feels like a way to live with profound purpose, even, or perhaps especially, without a personal self. It's truly inspiring. I think I get it now on a different level.
It certainly offers a radical alternative perspective,
Yeah.
if we connect this to the bigger picture. Inverse solipsism challenges us to question our most fundamental assumptions about the self, our individuality, and the very nature of reality. It suggests that perhaps the very act of relinquishing our individual claim to existence is what allows the rich, vibrant, and interconnected reality of the collective to truly shine, to gain its ultimate meaning.
Yeah.
This raises an important question for you, the listener. What do you think?
If the ultimate purpose of your non-existence is to affirm the existence of others, what simple act of genuine selfless service, devoid of ego or expectation, could you offer today to magnify the reality of someone around you? And how might that shift your own perception of meaning and connection in the grand tapestry of being? Something to reflect on.